Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, Anthony.
Today we're going to talk about how poor communication can hurt the probate process. So sometimes, actually often, the biggest problem in probate is the people involved. And we're going to talk today specifically about when there are too many people involved. Okay?
Yes.
All right. So, one example of that is when there are too many lawyers involved. You might be wondering, like, why would anyone ever want there to be too many lawyers involved? There's, doesn't everyone want to minimize lawyers? But sometimes you have situations where just everyone wants to lawyer up. The executor has his or her own counsel, right. And maybe, one heir has his own counsel to review what the executor is doing. And then another heir doesn't trust her brother, so she gets her own lawyer. And you kind of have this whole shenanigan of all these lawyers involved. Quite unnecessarily, probably. But
too many cooks in the kitchen is my favorite phrase when we're talking about all of this. Yeah.
But we also had a recent situation where one of the heirs or two of the heirs themselves had multiple lawyers involved. It was actually quite crazy, where it was a language barrier issue. They were non-English speakers, so they had their attorneys from their home country. Then those lawyers engaged somebody who could translate in the United States, right? So who was kind of like a middleman,
right?
But that person didn't have any probate experience, so that person contacted us. So you now have 3 layers of probate. Of lawyers between the heirs and the actual work that's being done. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more in a second. So that's not great.
Yeah. No.
And then sometimes you have heirs who also have multiple lawyers for other reasons. And we see this a lot too, where either a cousin or a family friend is a lawyer, whether it's an immigration lawyer or a car accident lawyer or whatever. But
those are my favorite,
right? You have them checking,
right.
Kind of what do you call it? Second guessing, or
yes,
or backseat driving, saying,
quarterback, all of that.
Cousin Larry, the car accident attorney, if he's okay with what you're doing for me, Mr. Executor.
Yes.
So none of these. I mean, I hope we're making it clear. None of these are great situations. Yeah. And one of the main reasons is, in most of those scenarios, everyone is billing.
Everyone.
Everyone knows lawyers are expensive and blood sucking and whatever.
However your feeling is. But you just said, 3 lawyers times even one email is now 3 billable, 2-minute increments or anything. It's now times 3.
Yeah. So if you have 4 lawyers on and the average billing is let's just say $400 an hour.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
So you're now doing $1,600 an hour.
Right. So that one email circulating that everyone has to look at, you figure is now should have taken 5 minutes, yep. Quick answer, boom. And now it's taking half an hour times the salary or the hourly rate of 4 people, plus paralegals, legal assistants. I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah. Just not great.
No.
So let's move on to the next, and I alluded to this. The next problem when there's bad communication in probate is when there's too many layers. And I just gave you that example of the heirs who, for language issues, or for supposedly language issues, had 4 layers between them and the actual executor. But why is that a problem? Remember the game when you were a kid, the game Telephone?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Where, I whisper something to you, Janice, and then you whisper to the person to your left, and it goes around and around until it gets to the end. And invariably at the end, does the final recipient have anything close to the accurate message?
It was never close.
Yeah. And I know that sounds like, that's just a children's game. This is where you have, professionals and lawyers in between. Yeah. It should be fine. No, it's not fine.
It's not. No.
It's exactly the same.
Next time you're in a group of friends, try the game and you'll see it does not end up the way the first person.
And it's not just about, you might think, then those lawyers are just poor communicators because they can't relay the message properly. It's not about that.
No, not
it's
at all.
about biases and nuance getting lost along the way, and or biases getting inserted along the way, so that.
Or when you said any language barriers, not so much any translation, but inflection, right? all languages have their inflection, whereas we may say something that means something different when translated, right? So it could get lost in the communication down the line.
And not only does the message get garbled, potentially, or pretty much it definitely gets garbled.
Definitely, yeah.
But there's delays, because if the message from the executor needs to pass through 3 lawyers before it gets to the air, let's say every lawyer or each step takes on average 12 hours for a turnaround on an email, just because they need time to sit down and digest and think about it and then
right.
forward it to the next person in the chain. So now it's like 2 days before anything gets to the air, when it could be direct, right?
Right. Absolutely. And then if you're talking, like you said, sometimes you're working with different time zones,
right,
overseas. So then you're kind of even adding more to it, because when you send the email, people are sleeping. So then they send it back, and definitely some delays there.
Excellent
that we've
point.
Seen. Yeah.
And then the last thing where poor communication situations can lead to probate problems is when there's just too many emails.
Oh, that's my favorite.
So whether it's because everyone has their own lawyer or there's multiple layers, I think this applies to a lot of like corporate or group situations, where if you have 10 people on a chain and everyone feels the need to pipe in and say something, even if a lot of those messages are just completely pointless. I'm sure we've all been there.
Yeah.
Not everyone can scroll through 10 messages and suss out immediately what's the important piece of information, and important information will get lost in this barrage of email chains. Has that happened to you, Janice?
Oh, yeah, all the time. So I'll come in on the 20th email where it's, Janice, can you do such and such? And then you've got to scroll through and say, well, what's the key point here? What are we looking at? Yeah, it gets so complicated. And how long it took to figure it out is more billable time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're still going back to that first point. So many cooks in the kitchen. Now you're talking about just to figure out what they're saying, you're sifting through 20 emails.
Yeah. This can also be, you can end up having multiple chains where, wait, where was that address that I needed? Or did they already tell us which item we need to move?
Yeah. Or you left somebody off the email on accident, and then they chime in a few days later of, hey, wait, where's this? And you're like, oh, we did that 2 days ago. And then you got to loop back in, and that happens.
Also, when you have a big chain like that, you have an issue. You run into the problem of nobody knows who's doing what, and it's kind of like I think parents might relate to this. When you're with your kids with a bunch of other families, it's kind of like nobody's watching their kids or nobody's watching any of the kids,
because they think the other parent's watching the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. If you have these mass email chains with all these lawyers, it's kind of like maybe you get into this problem where everyone's assuming somebody else is handling it. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's it. I mean, just kind of pointing out from some recent experiences how having all these, like you said, cooks in the kitchen can just lead to a lot of problems based on just communication issues.
Absolutely. Probate is complicated. I mean, we've talked about this many times, but if you want to know a little bit more, I suggest Anthony's book, How Probate Works, available on Amazon. That at least give you something, to get started with, right? So you're armed with knowledge.
Sounds good. Yeah, totally encourage that, because it makes our lives easier once you get to us.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, very good, Janice. As always, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We will cover more topics like this next time. Take care.
Thanks.